All right, welcome back. This is Tyler Jones, publisher of The Arena, South Carolina's only progressive media company. And I am joined by an old friend, somebody that I've wanted to talk to for a while about this subject, um, Chip Felkel, who is a long-time political strategist with a long, long history with the Republican Party going back decades. He's worked for just about everybody on the Republican side that you can imagine. Bush, the RNC, just about every Republican in the state of South Carolina, probably at one point or other. But in 2016, he became one of the few Republicans who were willing to tell the truth about Donald Trump. And he was involved early on with the Lincoln Project. And now I'll let him describe sort of where he falls on the political spectrum. But Chip Felkel, really, really excited to talk to you today. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. It's good to be with you. I jokingly refer to myself as a Republican in exile. I'm still conservative. I still think we need a strong defense, and I like my taxes to be low, but I'm not against government. I think government has a role. I think immigration is a big challenge for everybody, and we could fix it if both sides would quit raising money off of it. Um, you know, I, I, I'm a, I guess some people would say I'm a moderate conservative. Um, Less government. You'd live your life, I'll live mine.
But Chip, how much does the policy even matter anymore, as
Unfortunately,
opposed to
it's
the?
it's all about personality.
Yeah.
Now, I will say that I think a lot of that did start, I think, with Obama, given he didn't have a lot of history, you know. But it is almost like this whole segment decided that, okay, the D's did it, now the R's can do it. We don't have to worry about policy. We don't have to worry about substance. We just have to feel good or have confirmation bias or whatever else. And you look how easily Trump dispatched traditional Republicans in his initial primary. And, and that was, in my view, that was kind of the beginning of the end of the Republican Party that I have worked in for a long time.
Well, one of the many reasons I wanted to talk to you, Chip, is because you're one of the smartest political people I know, even though we've been on other sides
Yeah.
of politics for a long time. But you're somebody that tells the truth, will call a spade. And, I've admired your honesty over the last few years, being one of the few Republicans that are willing to openly criticize President Trump. But I like the fact that I don't know where you fall now, and I think that's why this conversation is going to be interesting because I've been dying to know. And I don't know if you're an undecided voter. I don't know if you would classify yourself as that. But I would like to know from your perspective how you have seen the last 3 weeks going. Let's just start at 9:01 when that debate got started and you saw what kind of performance Joe Biden was going to give. What was your thinking after that?
Well, this is bad. This is really bad. He's not engaged. He looks disoriented. It's a extreme contrast about vibrancy, if you will, there with Trump. Now, it Trump was Trump. He always is. And I do think sometimes that this is we can have another conversation about this, but I think historically, maybe on a national level, maybe not at the local level, Democrats seem to get a little bit in the weeds to me on policy, and as opposed to Republicans, whether good, bad, indifferent, get those sound bites in,
Mm-hmm.
and they're emotional connection sound bites, and there's nothing emotional about statistics. So, in terms of contrast to campaign styles and everything else, but it was clear that Trump was, fired up, ready to go, and going to go for the jugular and attack and tell lies like he always does. And so, it was for someone who has never supported Trump, believes Trump has been a terrible addition to the mix, that the GOP, as I knew it and worked in, doesn't exist anymore. Um, I would have liked to have seen Biden do much better than he did. Um, I think this is about democracy. I think this is about Project 2025 and some of the extreme things that they want to do. I don't believe Donald Trump doesn't know all about 2025 because there's 100 people involved with it who are supporters or have been involved with him. It is extreme. I'm going to go so far out on a limb here for this podcast and say, before everybody started saying this nationally, I'd written an op-ed that I never got published, but I think the similarities to 1930s Germany and the United States right now are unique. And I think if you look at post-World War I, Treaty of Versailles, compare that to Iraq and Afghanistan, PTSD, soldiers coming back into Germany that didn't fit well into society, soldiers coming back in after Afghanistan and Iraq that don't fit well into society, industrialists who thought they could control Hitler, big business who thought they could control Trump, Goebbels and the Office of Propaganda, Fox News. There's about 3 or 4 others, but you get my point. And that's why I'm so concerned. I mean, look, do I agree with a lot of the current president's policies? Not particularly, but he didn't try to overthrow an election. He didn't say we should suspend the Constitution. He isn't talking about the Insurrection Act. He hasn't brought he didn't bring a tremendous coarseness and incivility to American politics. And so while I don't agree with a lot of his policies, he would have been my preferred choice.
Well, going back to
I'm still a conservative,
yeah,
I'm just
sure.
not a Trump guy.
Yeah, going back to your comparison to 1930s Germany, I think that is shared by, first of all, a lot of people, but also that is why post-debate, this conversation was so difficult but so necessary about what Joe Biden should ultimately do. How quickly did you realize that that was the solution, or did you think that was the solution after the debate?
If you mean by the solution of him withdrawing, is that what you're
Yeah, sorry.
asking?
Yeah, sorry.
I think the die had been cast, and I think there was no way to recover from that. I just don't, because the whole thing before, even up to that point, had been his age. He'd be, how old he would be throughout the second term. Those were already not just attacks by the Trump campaign. I mean, those were legitimate questions that even the Democrats, I think,
Absolutely. Yep.
were asking that question. And so when you had that debacle of a debate for Biden, I think the die was cast, and I really don't think there was any recovery from that. Unfortunate, sometimes they're one instant, in the political arena that just puts the nail. I won't say it.
Well, this wasn't Dukakis in a helmet either. This was
Right.
an earth-shattering moment in politics, and frankly unprecedented.
Mm-hmm.
You've been involved in campaigns for
A while.
30, 40 years. And also you've been involved at the RNC. I assume have been to many, many conventions, national conventions. Just how difficult is it for a national party to switch nominees this late in the game?
I don't recall exactly when Lyndon Baines Johnson got I think I was 5, so I don't quite remember that. I don't remember the timing when he announced he wasn't going to get out, but I think it was a lot earlier.
It was a lot earlier than this, yeah.
It is a massive undertaking. It is unbelievably hard. There's a certain segment of the Biden operation that Harris can assume, but she's not going to want all that. She's going to want her people,
Yeah,
and so I think it's particularly hard. But I also think, look, she raised $60 million yesterday, and I think there is a renewed enthusiasm that has taken over what was a malaise in the Democratic Party after that in after that debate. So enthusiasm can go a long way. The Republicans came out of Milwaukee, unified,
Yeah.
and full of vigor and vitality, and Trump's our guy and whatever. And I think coming, I'd say Friday and Saturday were probably even worse for folks on the other side, because oh crap, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And look, we love Joe. Joe's been a statesman. Joe's been civil. Joe's a good guy. Joe helped me. He helped my whatever. And so this, I think it was expected, but I'm not sure it was expected yesterday afternoon.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
and
don't
there's a
think
renewed
anybody
interest.
expected.
There seems to be a renewed enthusiasm in terms, like there's really going to be a fight.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And I think I know the answer to this question, but what do you think the Republicans and the Trump campaign wanted Biden to do?
Stay in.
Stay in. Why?
Yeah. Well, because he's 3 years older than Trump, so he's old and decrepit, right? Because some days he's on and some days he's off. I think that the president made some additional errors post debate. He joked about his schedule, 10 to 4,
Going to bed early.
started opening up the questions about what if something happens at 3 a.m.
Yeah.
They wanted him in. And so yes, I'm sure they've been doing. Wiles and Las Vegas aren't dumb. They're smart people, and I'm sure they have been doing. We're doing some since the debate. We're doing some planning as it relates to Harris or somebody. But if you saw Tim Alberta's, I thought, well done piece on that, most of their campaign centered around running around Joe Biden, there's got to be a shift in focus on how they execute that. You cannot campaign against, you can try to hang Biden's administration and policies around her, but you can't execute that campaign in the same way. And I think one of the things they're probably very concerned about is his attacks on Biden cannot be the same attacks on Harris. Suburban women won't like it. Suburban women who are upset about the Supreme Court decision on abortion won't. It sounds like she's got pretty good support with African Americans and Latinos, and Trump had been making a direct effort about the African American vote. So they can't prosecute this thing. Interestingly enough, use that word, former prosecutor, the vice president, but they can't prosecute it the same way. They may try, but I don't think they can.
And Trump also doesn't do very well when dealing with black women. He just doesn't have a great history with that for whatever reason. And if I were
I have some
Lasavita,
theories,
those
but
guys,
that's okay.
well, yeah, so do I. But if I was Lasavita, that's what I would be worried about: is an unhinged boss going off the teleprompter talking about Kamala Harris three or
Yeah.
four times a week. That would terrify me if I was.
I mean, look, Saturday, Trump said, I took a bullet for democracy.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought he wasn't going to talk about it anymore. He said at the RNC,
he said
I'm never going to talk about this again. It's too
it was so tough. It was such a terrible moment. You won't hear me speak of it again, which we all knew was bullshit. But
until 2 days.
may have to edit that. Later. I'm sorry. What did he speak? 93 minutes on Thursday night.
Yeah.
93 minutes, and
I fell asleep, woke up, and he was still talking. True story.
12 to 15 minutes were, this is terrible. This happened. God put his hand on me. Walked over and kissed the uniform it was stagecraft. I mean, look, the guy was a reality TV star. He said, he's an entertainer. It's a show. It goes back to the cult of personality discussion, and then he reverted to the Trump that a certain segment of the country seems to like.
Do you think there will be a second debate?
Actually, I think one of the things Harris, once she secures the nomination, should do is challenge him to a debate immediately, because I think he'll take the bait. I don't think his ego will allow him to not take the bait. Hell, she probably ought to even challenge him to a golf match while she's at it. You know,
or just multiple debates. Like what's the, how does that help the country to see just, one debate, when the previous one was with different people?
Yeah, I find it particularly interesting that some of Trump's people have been out on the airwaves saying that, trying to dig into the Democrat Party's rules and regulations about nominees and stuff, and talking about whether or not she can even be the, these are the same people that said nobody stormed the Capitol, for God's sake.
Yeah, right,
I mean,
right.
So I find that humorous. To go back to our initial part of this conversation, I just think we can do. I think we could do a lot better. I mean, between Biden and Trump, 330 million people, and these are our choices.
Yeah.
And Trump particularly. I got into this stuff, as you said, 40 years ago. 1986 was my first campaign, Campbell for governor. Campbell had his issues. Campbell wasn't perfect, but he was a really decent guy who just happened to have, had a conservative ideology, and he got elected. And guess what? He could work with people in the General Assembly. He got a lot of things passed. And I had the privilege of working for George H.W. Bush, who was one of the finest people who ever served in that office, and who I had an opportunity to spend a good bit of time with. And he was a gentleman's gentleman. He was an outstanding guy. And I think part of that for me, oh, you don't like the mean tweets. No, I don't like the asinine approach to American politics.
Yeah. Keyword ass. I don't know if that was a pun, but it worked, Chip. No, I totally agree. So now the question is, the question last night when after Biden officially withdrew, was would he endorse Kamala Harris? About 5 minutes after he announced that he was dropping out, he did endorse Kamala Harris. It is 11:26 on Monday morning, and I think just about every potential vice president or potential candidate for president has endorsed her. Mm-hmm. Probably looking to be VP. Who should she pick, or what kind of candidate do you think she should pick from a Republican perspective or a former Republican perspective? Who do you think she needs to pick to win?
Well, I want to touch on his endorsement, if I could, for a second.
Sure.
Number one, I think it was obvious that it's obvious that he is somewhat diminished in his abilities. I mean, or he came across that way. Okay. And, he got COVID. He looked pretty weak when he got off the plane. We know what happened in the debate. I think part of his decision, and I think probably what helped make this decision for him, was his legacy. And if he lost to Trump and a lot of down ballot races were gone, Joe Biden would be remembered as the guy who wouldn't get out of the race and gave, and inflicted significant damage, related to those races. Number one. Number two, the near immediate endorsement of Kamala Harris was a jab right at Obama for not supporting him when he was trying to run in 2016, and everybody got behind Hillary, and he didn't support him. So I think
like, this is how you're supposed to do it.
Yeah. I think there was a little of that there. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not inside the DNC.
Well, it's
I'm
also
not
old school, and
it's also old school. It's also the right
yeah.
thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So now back to your question on who she should pick. I personally like Bashir in Kentucky. Now in his second term as a Democrat in a red state. So there's something to be said about that. However, I don't think he gives her what she needs. So I don't know if you can do Whitmer. It'd be unique. It'd be two women on the ticket. There would be something to that, and it would make it another challenge in terms of Vance and Whitmer and so forth there. Shapiro, to me, seems like a pretty good pick. Pennsylvania, critical state. A wild one won't happen, but in deference to you, I will say Roy Cooper, with your North Carolina roots.
Mm-hmm.
He's leaving office. Um, he would be a little bit. I don't know how Governor Cooper is, but he's a probably what early
I
sixties
think he's
maybe.
probably early to mid 60s. Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a little bit of a stability factor, there. But any of the names that I mentioned, of those, I like the narrative with Bashir, but I don't know. And I will say this: historically, the VP pick mattered. Okay, for the last couple of cycles, it hasn't mattered nearly as much. It just doesn't seem. But this could be one of the most consequential decisions in a long time, or maybe even whatever in presidential politics related to the VP pick.
Yeah, and the VP pick has not delivered a state in a long time. I'm trying to think of the last time it really helped deliver a
Yeah,
state.
yeah,
I don't know if it was Texas with LBJ and
right,
Kennedy. Like, it's not typically, it doesn't work out that way. We all talk
right.
about, what candidates could help the top of the ticket. Um,
And
Obviously,
that's why,
Biden.
look, respectfully, Tim Scott wasn't ever in serious consideration for this.
Yeah.
South Carolina brings nothing there. Trump's already got evangelicals, which is another one of the great mysteries of the world.
Mm-hmm.
So respectfully to him, he got in the race, he got out, but I don't know that if you look at geography there, obviously South Carolina really only plays a role in the primary.
Yeah, yeah, and same with Ohio these days. Didn't used to be that way, but Ohio is no longer a swing state. But the thing I like about your picks, I hadn't thought about Whitmer, an all female ticket. That would be certainly interesting and unprecedented. But Cooper, Shapiro, Bashir, what do they all have in common aside from being white men? They're all former
Governors.
AGs.
Uh,
Well,
they're
they're
all, ah,
governors,
they're
but
all
they're all
former
former
AGs, and
AGs.
yeah,
So you have the potential to have two prosecutors on the ticket running against a felon, which is nice for messaging. I'm not sure. Look, I love Roy Cooper. I grew up in North Carolina. Most folks know that. Guy's never lost an election in his life. He's from Nash County, North Carolina, which is sort of in the middle of nowhere. He's not the most exciting figure, but that's why people like him, because he just kind of puts his head down and gets things done. But I'm not sure that he's the type of um, leader that could carry North Carolina for Kamala Harris if she wasn't already going to be competitive there. But I do think Pennsylvania will be close enough where having the governor on the ticket could help win the state. And if there's one state that, the Democrats have to win, it's Pennsylvania. So
right, right.
I think Josh Shapiro has a big leg up for that reason.
I'm not aware. Maybe you can add this, but I don't know what Whitmer's numbers look like in Michigan. I don't know whether is she trending up, trending down.
I think all of those governors that you just mentioned are some of the most popular governors in their state. I think Roy Cooper's up there as well as one of the most popular. And Andy Bashir's. I mean, any Democrat who can win Kentucky twice,
Yeah,
Democrats should be listening to what he has been doing. I don't know if his persona. He's kind of like Cooper, not the most exciting. He's not going to get up and give you, the kind of speech that's going to change your life. But he wins consistently, and that's something
well,
the
I do
Democrats
think
need to.
I do think your point about prosecutors with Vance, that's going to be they got to be able to go toe to toe with them. I'm not saying Cooper can't, but you also want that contrast.
Yeah.
Van, part of what Vance is. What about part about of the biographical push that's been heard about him? He's 39 years old. He's the heir
Yeah.
apparent to Trumpism, um, and so I do think that's in consideration. I keep going
Putting a
back to it.
stop to Vance this cycle feels like it's putting a stop to the MAGA movement. If we stop it this time, it's still going to be around, but it's going to be much harder for them to come back in 4 years if it's defeated this time. But if Trump wins, then the MAGA movement is just getting started. He's 39 years old, like you said.
Yeah, and he'll be the heir apparent. And he's certainly he's a long way from hillbilly elegy. Let's put it like that. I think the other thing here is the interesting thing is the tech community getting involved here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Musk, Teal, others. Um, that's going to make it's interesting with the money Musk is talking about putting in this race. Um, I just see it as it's going to be the next it's going to be wild.
Yeah.
I think the other thing I want to say here is that one of my issues, if you will, as a conservative, is that populism isn't conservative,
Right.
and
Right.
the whole MAGA movement is about nationalistic populism. And I'm sure there are those that on the right that they see this, they'll use that term. Well, he's a rhino. I would suggest to you that MAGA is the epitome
Yeah.
of rhinoism, because there's look it up, man. Populism isn't conservative. It's just not. So that's another issue I have with with that movement is that I believe that the party has been pulled away by a guy who cult of personality. I will never, till my dying day, understand the Well, I will understand the evangelical attraction, and it's about power. Um, if you haven't read it, read Tim Alberta's book.
It's on my list. I have not read it yet, but I'm dying to read it.
I'll give where is it? It's right here. Give him a
Loan
plug.
it to me.
Absolutely.
I grew up in that. I mean, it is the most fascinating part of the Trump dynamic to me is how he has turned evangelicals into MAGA cultural warriors.
Well, their big issue. Look, pre Roe versus Wade, it was a greater mystery. But
Yeah,
that was a
yeah,
a very big issue. And I had a piece in the Post and Courier a week or so ago, where I tried to make the point that we need to get out of our own bubbles. Um, don't stay on Fox, don't stay on MSNBC, don't stay on CNN. You know, you might learn something collectively. You might get to the truth if you take a listen from a variety of sources. Don't assume you understand where somebody's coming from. Um, don't blast them on social media, which I think is really, really played a tremendous role in where we are. I think you would agree. Social media has been, it's great to be able to post about your kids and your team, but it's taken a whole nother level, and it hadn't been in a positive way. Have a conversation with somebody. Go to dinner with somebody you disagree with politically. You don't have to throw your bread at them. Go have a nice dinner. Talk about issues. Talk about their perspective and why they feel the way they do, and hug or shake hands or give a toast and go about your day. We don't have nearly enough of that these days.
Chip, that is why I wanted to talk to you because these are the kind of conversations that I think are productive in trying to find solutions. Too many people are willing to point out the problems, but not enough are willing to find the solutions. And that's something I've always admired about you. You've always been willing to tell the truth and stand on your principles. And I wish more conservatives did that. Frankly, over the last 3 weeks, I wish there were more Democrats who would do that.
Yep.
And luckily, there were enough that stood up and said what needed to be said. And I think we're probably in a better position to defeat Donald Trump than we were 3 weeks ago because of that. But I echo everything you said. Let's keep talking. Let's keep listening to opposing views because, like you said, we could all afford to learn something about the other side, and we'll be
Come
better off
on,
for it.
man. I mean, life's too short to spend all our time yelling at each other. Shouting gets us nowhere. Running roughshod over somebody. I'll go further back. We got a Declaration of Independence, and we got a Constitution through what? Compromise.
Yeah, compromise. It is not a 4-letter word,
It is
literally.
not. It is not.
All right, Chip. Thanks for joining me. Let's do this
Thank you.
again. I think these conversations are not just interesting but productive. So let's
Absolutely.
do it
Thanks for
again.
having me.
Chip Felkel, where can people find you online, on social media, and
At
professionally?
Chip Felkel on Twitter. I don't do threads too much, but and we're at felkelgroup.com. We do a lot of strategic communications, issue management, um, and try to do impactful projects.
Chip Felkel is one of the smartest people I know in politics. Thank you for joining me, and let's do it again real soon, Chip. Take care,
Absolutely.
man.
Thanks, man.
Thanks, buddy.